"You're not on the list, ma'am." It's strange how 5 words can knock the air right out of you, not because they're cruel, but because they confirm something you've quietly feared your whole life, that you are, in fact, forgettable. I'm Leona Maddox. I'm 33 years old. Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army. At least, that's what it said on the badge clipped to my dress blues the night I stood outside my brother's promotion ceremony, holding a formal invitation with my name on it. Except, apparently, that wasn't enough. The young officer at the gate had the kind of posture that reminded me of my father. Rigid, by the book. He looked at me like I was the problem, not the list. I held the paper out again. He didn't even glance. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll have to step aside." Behind him, through the glass doors, I saw everything. My mother adjusting Ryan's collar like he was a boy on his first day of school. My father laughing. Something I hadn't seen him do for me since I was 8. The table was full of family, a few high-ranking friends. Faces I knew. Faces that once kissed me goodnight. Not a single one had noticed I wasn't inside. That's when I realized this wasn't a clerical error. It was a message. Not loud, not cruel, just clear. They had erased me. I stood there for a few seconds longer, like my body hadn't caught up with the truth yet. Then I folded the invitation in half, slid it into my pocket, and told the officer it was fine. My voice was steady, but something inside me hollowed out right then, like a rotting tree that finally cracked. You ever feel invisible even when you're wearing medals on your chest? Take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you feel this story already hitting somewhere tender. Like, comment, and share where you're listening from, your city, your time zone. I'd love to know who's out there with me right now. Now, let's listen to my story journey. I walk away from the hall in heels that click too loudly against the stone. My uniform feels like a costume. My spine burns with the kind of tension that says, "You should have seen this coming." But I didn't. Not really. I still carried this ridiculous hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would remember to look for me. Or even just say, "Where's Leona?" Instead, I'm standing in the parking lot of a rented conference center, wind catching the edge of my coat, while my brother basks under chandeliers and speeches and family pride. This isn't the first time I've been left out. I grew up in a house where silence was more common than affection, where achievements were currency and Blake always had the bigger wallet. He was the golden boy, captain of the football team, first to enlist, first to get a medal, first to get a photo hung on the wall. I was second, always second. Sometimes, not even that. At family dinners, he got to talk about his unit's accomplishments. I got asked if I was still doing the sneaky recon stuff. I made captain slower. Not because I was less skilled, but because I didn't know how to play politics. I wasn't loud. I didn't command a room. I just did the work. Quietly. Perfectly. Until one day, even that wasn't enough. You'd think military service would be the great equalizer. But sometimes, your last name is a weight you can't shed. And sometimes, the people who should know you best don't know you at all. I get in my car, hands trembling even though the air isn't cold. I don't cry. I haven't in years. But I feel something cracking inside my chest, a pressure that's been building for too long. It isn't just about the ceremony, it's the culmination. The proof that I could disappear in front of them and no one would blink. The worst part? They probably thought I'd understand. She's always quiet. She'll be fine. She knows we love her. But love isn't silence. Love isn't absence. Love sure as hell isn't forgetting someone's name at the door of their own blood's promotion. I don't drive home. Not yet. I park in a grocery store lot 20 minutes away and sit there with the engine off, watching people walk in and out with their arms full of things they need. I used to think all I needed was to earn enough. prove enough, do enough. But maybe what I really needed, what I still need, is to finally stop expecting people to love me the way I've had to earn it. Maybe love that asks you to be invisible isn't love at all. And maybe the hardest truth is that family doesn't always mean belonging. That night, I go home to my small apartment on the edge of the base. I take off my uniform slowly, piece by piece, like I'm shedding armor I no longer believe in. I hang it carefully in the closet, metals still pinned, creases sharp. It deserves respect, even if they don't see it. Then I sit on the floor and stare at nothing for a long time. My phone buzzes once. A photo of Blake and Dad holding a plaque. Caption, "Proud day for the Maddocks." Not all of them. I delete it. I don't sleep that night. My brain hums with memories, with unsaid things, with years of trying to matter and never quite arriving. But somewhere around 3 a.m., a thought settles in quietly. If I was erased, maybe that's where the story actually begins. Not with the applause I never got, but with the silence that followed. I used to think the house I grew up in was made of brick and drywall. But looking back now, it was really made of rules, expectations, and a silence that could suffocate a child if she wasn't loud enough to punch through it. Blake never had that problem. He was born 2 years before me, but sometimes it felt like a lifetime. He cried louder, he walked sooner, he spoke earlier. And according to my parents, that meant he was destined for great things. My dad used to say, "You can tell a soldier from the way he fills a room." Blake didn't just fill it, he took ownership. Me? I was the quiet one, the girl who didn't ask for seconds at dinner because someone might say she was greedy. The daughter who brought home perfect grades and was told, "Well, you should. Your brother did too." Every family has a golden child. I just didn't realize until much later that some families build shrines to them and call it home. My father was Navy, 23 years of service, and not a single day off from discipline. Even after retirement, he woke up at 0500, made his bed like an inspection was coming, and barked orders like the kitchen was a command center. My mother wasn't softer, just quieter. A war nurse turned homemaker. She had the hands of a surgeon and the heart of a wall. She loved us, I think, in that way people do when they've been taught to fear tenderness. We were her duties. Blake was her pride. I was her shadow. I remember one Christmas, maybe I was 10, when I gave my dad a hand-drawn picture of a ship. I'd spent hours on it, studying photos from his old deployment albums. When he opened the wrapping, he blinked at it once and set it aside. "Ryan's going to love his new scope," he said to my mom. They forgot to thank me. That was the year I learned that, in our house, love wasn't given. It was earned. And the price was attention. I didn't have the kind Blake had. He played sports. He told jokes. He brought home trophies. I brought home silence and good behavior. I didn't rebel. I adapted. I joined JROTC in high school, not because I wanted to be like Ryan, but because I thought maybe then my father would look at me and see something other than quiet disappointment. I still remember the first time I put on the uniform. I stood in front of the mirror and thought, maybe now I'll be visible. Spoiler, I wasn't. When Blake graduated from officer school at 21, my parents threw a party so loud you could hear it from 2 blocks away. There were banners, flags, a cake with "Our Future Commander" piped in icing. I was 19 at the time, still in basic training, but I called in from the barracks to congratulate him. He barely said 2 words. "Keep working hard, Leona," he told me, like I was some intern he barely knew. By the time I made lieutenant, Blake was already a captain. Our parents framed his certificates and placed them in the living room. Mine ended up in a drawer under the spare keys and tax folders. My mother once said, "You don't really like the spotlight anyway, do you?" No. But I did like being seen. I carved out my own path. I chose recon. I liked the silence, the focus, the precision. No flashy leadership, just discipline and results. I thrived in it, not because it came easy, but because I knew that being good wasn't optional. If I made a mistake, it wouldn't just be my failure. It would be confirmation of everything they believed, that Blake was the soldier and I was just tagging along. Still, I believed that maybe, someday, I'd earn enough to matter. That maybe, after enough successful ops, enough letters of commendation, my name would mean something at home. Maybe I'd hear my father say, "You made us proud, Leona." He never did. Instead, my visits were filled with updates about Ryan's next promotion. "He's being considered for major," my mom whispered once like it was a secret blessing. "Isn't that amazing?" I nodded, and she smiled like I had answered correctly. You know the funny thing? I wasn't jealous. Not in the way people think. I didn't want his medals or his rank. I wanted one evening, just one, where they asked me about what I saw out there, what I carried, what it cost me to come home every time without falling apart. But no one asked. I remember one Thanksgiving, both of us on leave, the table heavy with turkey and duty stories. Blake talked about strategy. Dad interrupted with praise. Mom refilled his plate. Then it was my turn. I said something about leading a 6-man team on a cross-border recon op in terrain that hadn't seen friendly boots in 2 years. Dead silence. Then Dad nodded. "Sounds dangerous. You should be more careful." Careful. That was his word for me. Not strong, not skilled. Just careful. Like I was made of glass and luck. I smiled. I always smiled. I wonder now if they even realized how deeply I was learning to disappear. But the truth is, silence has a cost. When you live long enough unseen, you start to question if you exist at all. Then came the mission. The one that would finally force everything into the open. The one that would break what little was left between me and the family that never really saw me to begin with. I still remember the name of the operation. Silent Pulse. Doesn't sound like much, right? Like we were just brushing over some dusty corner of the world. But that mission didn't sweep. It buried. And what it buried most was me. It was 2 years ago, not long after I'd earned my 3rd stripe. I was stationed with a recon unit in a high-risk zone, terrain so tangled and hostile we named our perimeter checkpoints after ghosts. We had just wrapped a 3-week patrol when command summoned me to a forward base for a new assignment. Blake was already there. I hadn't seen him in over a year. Not since a Christmas call where he spent most of the time reminding me to stay sharp and keep the politics clean. And now here he was, standing at the front of the briefing tent, arms folded like he owned oxygen. "Lieutenant Maddox," he said with that familiar smirk that always made me feel 6 inches tall. "Captain?" I nodded back, deadpan. He pulled me into a quick one-armed hug, then clapped me on the back like I was one of his rookies. "Still doing the sneaky stuff in the bushes, huh?" he teased. "Still pretending charisma is strategy?" I replied, dry. He laughed. I didn't. And that was the tone for the rest of the briefing. The op was simple. On paper. Intel had flagged a compound suspected of harboring arms traffickers and rogue actors with connections to local insurgents. My team was to run covert surveillance, confirm targets, extract intel. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. It was standard for recon. Get in, observe, get out. I spent the next 48 hours planning. I studied terrain maps until my eyes blurred, drew up fallback routes, worst-case scenarios. I assigned roles, established contingencies, even prepped medical exfil plans in case something went sideways. Ryan, meanwhile, played liaison. Apparently, he'd been added to the operation as a strategic advisor, which confused the hell out of me. He had no familiarity with the terrain, hadn't worked with any of the personnel. But command told me flat out, He's got higher eyes watching him. Just work with him. I should have trusted my gut. But rank is funny. When someone has more of it, you're trained to defer, even if it grates, even if the logic stinks. I remember sitting across from him at a steel table, a red lamp overhead throwing shadows across his face. He tapped the timeline chart with his knuckle. "Why are we waiting until Odo 200 hours?" he asked. "Because that's when the satellite pass gives us thermal coverage," I said. "Anything earlier and we go in half blind." He leaned back like he was relaxing into a punchline. "Sometimes speed is the intel." "No," I said flatly. "Speed is a gamble. You're being too cautious, Leona." I hated how he said my name, like it was a reminder I didn't belong in the room. "This isn't your team," I told him. "We follow the recon plan." But he didn't let up. Over the next few hours, I watched him whisper to officers, throw just enough weight around, chip away at the schedule until eventually the orders shifted. The timeline was moved up. We were deploying at 2230 hours, 3.5 hours earlier than I had planned. Outside of thermal range, without satellite coverage. I wanted to fight it, but technically, the green light still had to come from me. And in the end, I gave it. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I was too used to being told Blake knew better. Or maybe, deep down, I was just tired of arguing with a system that had already decided who was right before the facts came in. I remember standing by the launch trucks, the air sticky with heat and quiet tension. My team was already suited up. Faces painted, weapons checked, eyes on me. I gave the nod. We moved fast. The terrain was vicious, thick underbrush, sharp ridges, uneven earth that swallowed every footstep. I led point, signaling the line through with gloved hands. We moved like shadows, every part of me alert, counting seconds, reading every branch like it might bite. And then, just beyond the third ridge, I saw it. A flicker. The wrong kind of reflection. "Down," I hissed, but it was too late. The blast snapped the night open like a thunderclap. Fire surged up from the dirt. I remember the shockwave hitting my chest, knocking me sideways into a tree. The sound rang in my ears like a scream underwater. Corporal Dean had been 10 feet ahead. He took the full force, thrown like a rag doll. I crawled to him, mud slick on my arms. His vest was half melted. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. He died before I could stop the bleeding. I radioed for evac, but the comms were scrambled. Static. Distortion. We tried signaling flares, but one of the birds took fire on approach and spiraled out before it could land. Chaos turned surgical. 2 dead, 5 wounded, and me, commander of the operation. When we finally got out, I collapsed next to the LZ, staring at the sunrise like it had betrayed me too. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I replayed everything in my head. Every call, every signal, every footstep. And all I could think was, I knew. I knew better. But I didn't follow the plan. I let someone else bend it. And now, people were dead. The debrief was cold. A panel of 3 officers, 1 silent observer, a tape recorder blinking red. "Why did you authorize early deployment, Lieutenant Maddox?" I answered flatly. "I was advised the window had narrowed." "Who advised you?" Pause. I wanted to say Ryan. Every cell in my body screamed it. But technically, he hadn't ordered anything. He had just suggested. Just enough to shift the blame, but not wear it. "Captain Maddox," I said finally. The silence that followed was like a coffin lid shutting. "And what authority did he have over your field decisions?" "None," I admitted. The hook was set. Blake never showed for the inquiry. He sent a short statement. Something vague about joint pressures and on-ground discretion. Joaquin, no mention of our disagreement, no trace of the conversation that changed everything. The final report came a week later. Failure to adhere to operational protocol resulting in avoidable casualties. Recommendation, suspension. Further review. My rank stayed intact. Barely. But my credibility? Gone. And Ryan? He got promoted. When the report hit my inbox, I didn't open it right away. I stared at the subject line for 10 minutes, fingers hovering above the mouse like touching it would make it real. Eventually, I clicked, because there was nothing left to do but read my own undoing. Suspension. Effective immediately. Further review pending. 1 paragraph. 4 sentences. My name in black ink. My future in gray fog. I packed my gear in silence. Nobody stopped me on my way out. Not out of malice, just vacancy. A few people looked up. Most didn't. I wasn't radioactive, just erased. The kind of fall you don't whisper about because you don't need to. It's already understood. The last thing I packed was my name patch. I folded it into a square and laid it on top of my duffel like a flag on a casket. I didn't cry. That was the worst part. I didn't feel anything. I left the base by bus. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just kept moving until the world stopped looking familiar. Eventually, I landed in a small town in the middle of nowhere, 3 states away. Population. Forgettable. I found a 1-bedroom above a hardware store. The kind of place with creaky floors and walls that smelled like sawdust and old hope. It was perfect. I didn't wear my uniform again. Didn't unpack the medals. Didn't shave the back of my neck like regulation told me to. I ran in the mornings, not to train, but to outrun the echo of that explosion. I stared at the ceiling at night, counting each tick of the clock like it might return what I'd lost. My body was whole, but something vital had been surgically removed, without anesthesia. Purpose? Maybe? Or trust? Or whatever connects you to the life you used to believe in. Some nights I dreamed of Dean. Not just the way he died, but the way he looked during prep. Nervous, but ready. His wife had just had a baby. He'd shown me a photo before we deployed. I'd nodded, smiled, said something like, "Let's get you back in one piece." And I failed. But the worst dreams weren't about Dean. They were about Ryan. Not nightmares, just silence. His silence. His absence. No message, no call, no apology, not even a lie. He didn't reach out. Neither did my parents. You'd think they'd want to know what happened, want to hear my side. But their loyalty was quiet too, just pointed in the opposite direction. Blake had made it out clean. That was enough for them. 1 child still intact. Why look deeper? Eventually, I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Instead, I turned inward. I started digging. It began as a question that wouldn't leave me. What did I miss? I pulled out my notes from the op, my maps, my timeline drafts. I cross-referenced logs with my own memory, but memory is a slippery thing. I needed proof. So I reached out to the people who had once trusted me, quietly, carefully, not with accusations, just questions. 1 contact, a tech sergeant I'd worked with during training, responded first. He didn't say much, just sent a secure link. Classified satellite logs. The kind of file you're not supposed to have unless you know how to ask just right. And there it was. The window hadn't closed. Our original deployment time was still valid. The satellite pass would have provided full thermal coverage. The early push? Unauthorized. The briefing notes from command? Never changed. Which meant Blake lied. I felt something cold and clean sharpen inside me, not rage, not even betrayal, just clarity. I kept digging. A friend in logistics passed me a time-stamped chat, one I wasn't supposed to see. A message from Blake to an operations officer. "We can't wait for her recon pass. Trust me, I'll take the heat if it goes south." He never did. He watched me burn from a distance and kept walking. I compiled everything I had: timeline discrepancies, surveillance logs, the internal messages, my version of events. No drama, no editorializing, just truth. I sent it to the Office of Military Ethics. No cover letter, no plea. Just a folder, a brief summary, and one line: truth matters, even when no one's watching. Then I waited. It took 3 months. I went back to morning runs, to staring at grocery shelves for too long, to quiet dinners made for one. I thought maybe the system would ignore me again. But one afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Lieutenant Maddox?" a voice asked. Crisp, measured. "This is Colonel Rhodes. We've reviewed your file. We owe you more than an apology." I said nothing. I didn't trust words anymore. "We've amended the record. You were cleared. The disciplinary action has been expunged." A pause. "You're eligible to return, if you want to." If I want to. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to hang up and never look back. But deep down, below the ashes and silence, something still burned. Duty. Not to them. Not to Ryan. To the part of me that knew I still had more to give. So I said yes, not to reclaim the past, but to write the next chapter myself. I didn't return with any fanfare. No welcome back banner. No officers standing in salute. Just an ID badge reactivated and a locker reassigned in a new base with faces that didn't know the story behind the eyes staring back at them. And I preferred it that way. I was tired of proving I existed. My first weeks back, I said little and watched everything. I moved through drills with the same quiet precision I'd always had. I didn't correct the rumors. Some thought I was back from a long-term assignment. Others assumed I'd been on medical leave. Nobody said disgrace. That word had been wiped from the record, but not from memory. And I carried the memory like a secondary uniform. But I led. Small missions at first. Nothing flashy. Logistics support. Recon sweeps. Then came higher stakes assignments. Riskier terrains. Tighter teams. I led them not with force, but with the kind of calm that comes from surviving disaster. My reports were meticulous. My briefings short and sharp. I never exaggerated. I never complained. And slowly, they started to notice. The first time a junior officer addressed me as ma'am without a hint of sarcasm, I barely registered it. But later, I sat alone in the mess hall and felt it settle into my bones like warmth in winter. Then came the field commendation, then the promotion, then another. It happened in layers, not overnight. Like muscle rebuilding itself after trauma. No one gave me a parade. No one gave me an apology. But that's not what I wanted anymore. I didn't want justice. I wanted dignity, not the kind given, the kind earned. And slowly, I got it. I made captain, then major, eventually, commander. At every stage, I led with restraint. Not because I lacked authority, but because I knew what it cost to wield it carelessly. I knew what it meant to have someone else's silence destroy you. When younger officers came to me, I listened. When they questioned me, I welcomed it. Not because I wanted to be liked, but because I wanted them to know what I never got. That quiet strength has value. That a cautious decision is still a brave one. That being unseen doesn't mean being unworthy. And over time, my name, once buried under reports and whispered blame, started showing up in official briefings. Tactical plans, commendation lists, no longer in the fine print, now near the top. And with that visibility came invitations, conferences, panels, military galas. I ignored most of them. They felt performative, like a spotlight meant to prove someone had changed something. But then one day, a message landed in my inbox, encrypted, high priority, from Central Command, An invitation to the 75th anniversary gala of the 12th Infantry Division. My old division. The same one that had once investigated me, the same one that let my brother disappear from accountability while I stood in front of a tribunal alone. I nearly closed the email, but the message had one detail that made my hand pause mid-click. Distinguished commendations will be awarded. High-ranking officers expected to attend. Colonel Raymond Maddox, Major Blake Maddox. My father, my brother, and below that, General Leona Maddox, guest of honor. There it was. The name. My name. Unmistakable. Unavoidable. Unforgettable. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that screen like it was some kind of cosmic joke. After all the years of being erased, there I was, at the top of the list. For a moment, I didn't feel pride. I felt something stranger. Stillness. Like the universe had finally gone quiet enough to let my voice echo. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about everything. The bus ride that took me away, the folded patch in the duffel bag, the cold hallway outside Ryan's ceremony, the silence of my father's recliner. I thought about how close I'd come to disappearing completely. And now, I was going to walk into a room where they would all be. But this time, I wouldn't be the one standing outside the doors, waiting for someone to remember me. I would be the one they couldn't overlook. Not because I chased their approval, but because I'd outgrown it. I arrived 2 hours early, not because I need to, but because I want to. I want the time, the space, the quiet before the storm of applause, handshakes, strained smiles, and memory-laden glances that might or might not land where they should. The venue is a repurposed armory, grand now with polished marble floors, velvet drapes, and golden light fixtures that try too hard to soften a building made for war. Crystal chandeliers hang where spotlights used to be. They've turned steel into ceremony. I walk through the front doors and feel it immediately. The shift. Heads turning, eyes narrowing, widening, whispering, not with scandal, with recognition. They know who I am. And not because of Ryan, not because of my last name, but because of my record, my service, my command, my stars. My uniform is regulation perfect, pressed to sharp lines, ribbons arranged with surgical precision. The 4 stars on my collar catch the light when I move. People notice. I don't have to speak a word for the room to rearrange around me. General Maddox. The first greeting comes from a colonel I briefed last year. His voice has a note of awe, or maybe respect. He shakes my hand firmly, eyes locking with mine longer than etiquette demands. I nod. Colonel. Others follow. A lieutenant I trained. A young major who once shadowed my unit. A woman from logistics who told me, years ago, that she'd named her daughter after me. Each one a reminder. I wasn't erased. I just started writing on a different page. I move deeper into the hall. Past the round tables covered in medals and name tags and folded programs. At the far end, a massive digital display scrolls through the evening's honorees. I see it. General Leona Maddox, guest of honor. I stare at it longer than I should. Not because I'm in disbelief, but because some part of me, the child that once stood invisible at a kitchen table, still needs to see it. Still needs proof that this time they remembered. No one can say I'm not on the list. There's a moment, just a breath, where I want to laugh. Not out of joy. Out of something deeper. The absurdity of it all. The symmetry. Because not long ago I stood on the other side of glass doors, holding an invitation no one believed belonged to me. And now, my name is projected 10 feet tall. I don't sit right away. I walk. Past clinking glasses and gleaming metals. Past familiar faces who once didn't know mine. And eventually, I see them. Standing near the back, just inside the entry arch. My father. My mother. Ryan. grouped together like a portrait frozen in time. My father's posture is exactly as I remember, back straight, chin slightly lifted, but his eyes, they dart. Not proudly, not confidently. They search me like I'm something unexpected, like he didn't think I'd actually come. My mother stands beside him, hands clasped like she's holding on to something fragile. Regret, maybe. Or the last thread of a story she's told herself for years. One where I didn't deserve the seat. One where I was too quiet, too careful. And Ryan, he looks older. Not in age, but in burden. Like someone who's been running a long time and knows there's nowhere left to go. He sees me. And for once, he doesn't smile. He nods. That's all. And somehow, it's more honest than anything he's given me in years. But I don't approach them. Not yet. This moment is mine. I take my seat at the front table just below the stage. The program begins. Speeches. Introductions. The usual shuffle of formal ceremony. Applause that feels both too loud and not loud enough. Officers are called up. Awards are pinned. Words like valor, service, duty float through the air like ceremonial incense. Then the host steps to the microphone. And now, he says, we honor a name many of you already know, but perhaps not the full story. A ripple runs through the crowd, subtle, curious. Tonight, we recognize a leader who returned not from exile, but from endurance, who rose not through noise, but through unshakable precision and relentless service. A name once overlooked, now impossible to ignore. Please welcome our guest of honor, General Leona Maddox. The room stands, not all at once, but enough to make it echo. I rise. Slowly, I walk toward the stage as the clapping builds. Not polite applause, but something heavier. Something earned. Something laced with all the years I stayed silent and invisible and dignified anyway. The 4-star general presenting the award shakes my hand, pins the medal just above my heart, and leans in. They'll write this one down, he whispers. They offer me the microphone. I didn't prepare a speech, but silence here would feel like surrender. So I step forward, adjust the mic, find their faces in the crowd. My father, my mother, Ryan, all watching now, all hearing what they ignored for years. I wasn't supposed to be here, I say. A few murmurs, a shift in the air. Years ago, I stood outside a ceremony hall wearing the same uniform. I had an invitation in my hand, but I was told I wasn't on the list. Silence. That day, I walked away, not just from the building, but from people who never asked why, who believed I failed before they ever questioned what happened. Eyes turn toward Ryan. Some drop, some linger. But I didn't walk away from who I was. I rebuilt myself. Quietly, painfully. And when the truth came back around, I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for my place. A breath. This medal isn't redemption. It's recognition. It doesn't erase what happened. It honors what I became because of it. The room is still. And then, applause. Real. Lasting. Full-bodied. But I'm not finished. Not yet. I lift my hand gently and the room quiets again. I stand here today, not because I was believed, I say, my voice steady, but because I refuse to disappear. That sentence hangs in the air like a low bell, not accusatory, just undeniable. I step back from the microphone, not with flourish, just a small nod. Enough. The host thanks me. There's more applause. Commendations resume, but I don't hear them. I step off the stage and back toward my seat, and the moment, like a slow wave, begins to fade. And still, I feel it. That shift. Not in the room. In me. After the ceremony, people come. A young lieutenant tells me, "You're why I stayed in." A veteran nurse hugs me so tight I feel her metals press into my own. A woman in full dress blues grips my hands and says, "They almost erased me too." I nod. I don't have words for them. Not yet. But I see them. And they see me. I move toward the back of the hall, toward the exit. My stars feel heavy now, not in burden, but in gravity, like anchors pulling the world back into alignment. And then I see them, my family, standing in the quiet hallway just outside the ballroom, the same place I once stood alone, years ago, invitation in hand, unacknowledged. Now it's reversed. They're the ones waiting. My father speaks first. Just one word. Leona. Not lieutenant, not general. Just my name. The way he used to say it when he was disappointed. Except now it lands differently. Now it sounds like surrender. I meet his eyes. His back is still straight, but his shoulders, once so proud, have lost their sharpness. Something's collapsed inside him. I don't know if it's pride or the illusion that it was ever deserved. "You didn't tell us," he says. I breathe in, slow. "You didn't ask." He flinches, barely, but I see it. My mother steps forward, eyes glossy. "You could have said something," she whispers. "I did," I say. "For years. You just listened to someone else louder." Her lips part, but nothing comes. Then Blake steps forward. He's changed. Not just in face, but in the weight around his eyes. He no longer carries that untouchable glow. Something in him is quieter now. Not softer, but dented. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he says. "That night, the mission, things spiraled." "No," I correct him. "They didn't spiral. You let them." His mouth opens to respond, to defend, but I lift my hand again, just slightly. The same gesture I used on the battlefield when silence was the only command that mattered. "I'm not here to fight," I say. "And I'm not here to beg for closure. I came because I earned my place, not because I need your permission to be in the room." Silence. The kind that used to be used against me. But now, I own it. My mother's eyes shimmer. "We were wrong," she whispers. "We didn't know how to believe you." I give a small nod. I didn't need belief. I needed backup. No one speaks. 3 people who once defined my world now stand with nothing left to define me by. I, who was always the quiet one. I, who was told I was too careful. I, who was erased, have become the person they can no longer ignore. So I speak for all the years I didn't. "You taught me that family is loyalty," I say. "But you broke that rule before I ever did. You believed I failed before you ever asked why. You stood beside the one who had everything and left behind the one who built herself from nothing." I step closer, not in confrontation, but in clarity. "You chose to believe silence. I chose to speak through action. You chose comfort. I chose truth." I turn to Ryan. "I don't hate you, but I'll never forget what you let happen. I carried that alone, and I learned how to grow stronger carrying it." Then I say what I've carried for a lifetime. I don't need to be invited to the table anymore, because now I build my own. They don't reply, not because they can't, but because they know there's no defense left. And that's enough. I walk out of the hallway and into the night. The air is crisp, the sky clear. The stars above stretch endlessly, shining down not just on the building behind me, but on the path ahead. Some people spend their lives chasing family for validation. Others live trying to prove they were worthy all along. But me? I stopped chasing. I stopped explaining. I stopped shrinking to fit the comfort of people who never had the capacity to hold what I was becoming. Because I was never too much. They were just never enough. Now I lead, not because I need the world to remember my name, but because I finally remembered it myself. Leona Maddox, General, daughter of no one, leader of many, and that is more than enough.